Jake Murphy wiped the sweat from his forehead as he stepped off the transport shuttle onto the deck of the USS Discovery. The 19-year-old cadet from Ohio had dreamed of this moment since he was 12 years old watching space documentaries in his bedroom. Now he was actually here on a real starship about to explore unknown worlds. His hands shook a little as he carried his bag down the metal corridor. The ship was bigger than he had imagined, with white walls and blue lights running along the ceiling. Other crew members walked past him wearing the same dark blue uniforms he now wore. Some nodded at him while others were too busy with their work to notice the new cadet. Captain Lisa Rodriguez met Jake in the main briefing room along with 5 other crew members. She was a woman in her 40s with short black hair and kind brown eyes that made Jake feel more at ease. The captain explained that they were heading to a star system called Kepler 442 to study the planets there. Scientists on Earth had detected strange energy readings coming from the 4th planet and wanted the Discovery to take a closer look. Jake would be part of the landing team since he had studied geology in the academy. His job was to collect rock and soil samples while the others took readings with their instruments. The journey to Kepler 442 took 3 weeks. Jake spent most of his time learning about the ship and getting to know his fellow crew members. There was Dr. Emma Walsh, who studied alien life forms, though they had never found any yet. Lieutenant Ben Cooper was the security officer who would keep them safe on the planet. Engineer Kate Davis would handle all the technical equipment. Pilot Ryan Moore would fly them down to the surface. Jake felt lucky to work with such experienced people on his first mission. When they finally reached the star system, Jake pressed his face to the window of his quarters to get his first look at an alien world. The 4th planet was mostly brown and red with some areas of blue that might have been water. It looked very different from Earth, with no green plants visible from space. The captain announced over the ship's communication system that they would land the next morning after the overnight sensors finished their scans of the atmosphere. Jake barely slept that night thinking about walking on an alien world. He had read about other exploration missions, but this would be different because he would actually be there. When morning came, he put on his environmental suit and checked all the equipment twice like they had taught him in training. The suit would let him breathe and protect him from radiation or dangerous chemicals in the air. His sample collection kit contained special containers and tools for gathering rocks and dirt. The shuttle ride down to the planet surface was bumpy because of strong winds in the atmosphere. Jake gripped his seat as the small ship bounced and shook around him. Through the window he could see they were approaching what looked like ruins of some kind of buildings. Dr. Walsh got excited and started taking pictures with her camera. The structures were made of black stone and had strange curved shapes unlike anything humans had ever built. This was proof that intelligent aliens had once lived here, even if they were gone now. They landed in a flat area about half a mile from the ruins. The planet's air was safe to breathe according to their instruments, so they left their helmets in the shuttle. Jake took his first breath of alien air and found it smelled like metal and dust. The sky was an odd purple color and the sun looked smaller than Earth's sun. 2 small moons were visible even during the day. Everything felt lighter because the planet's gravity was weaker than what Jake was used to on Earth. The team walked toward the black stone buildings while Jake collected soil samples along the way. The dirt was very fine and had a reddish color. Like rust, some of the rocks contained crystals that sparkled in the alien sunlight. Jake carefully placed each sample in a labeled container following the procedures he had memorized. Dr. Walsh kept taking readings with her scanner looking for any signs of life, while Lieutenant Cooper watched for dangers. Inside the ruins they found rooms with high ceilings and doorways that were much taller than what humans would need. The aliens who built this place must have been very big. Strange symbols were carved into the walls, but nobody could read what they meant. Jake was examining a piece of metal that had fallen from the ceiling when he felt a sharp pain in his left hand. He had cut himself on a jagged edge that was sharper than it looked. Blood dripped from the cut onto the alien floor as Jake wrapped his hand with a bandage from his kit. Dr. Walsh offered to treat the wound, but Jake said it was not serious enough to stop their work. The cut stung, but he could still use his hand to collect samples. He was embarrassed about being careless on his first mission and did not want to seem weak in front of the experienced crew members. They spent 2 more hours exploring the ruins and collecting data. Jake managed to gather 12 different rock samples and 6 soil samples despite his injured hand. The team took hundreds of pictures and recorded detailed measurements of the buildings. Dr. Walsh found no signs of current life but the ruins proved that intelligent beings had definitely lived on this world long ago. As they prepared to return to the shuttle, Jake noticed something moving in the shadows between the buildings. At first he thought it might be blowing dust or debris, but then he saw it was much larger. Lieutenant Cooper saw it too and quietly told everyone to stay close together. They could not see what it was clearly, but something big was definitely watching them from about 50 yards away. The creature stepped out from behind the collapsed wall and Jake's heart nearly stopped beating. It stood 12 feet tall and powerful, legs with arms that ended in claws as long as kitchen knives. Its skin was black like the stone buildings, and its head had too many teeth showing in what might have been a grin. Yellow eyes stared at the humans without blinking. Jake had never seen anything so terrifying in his life. Lieutenant Cooper reached for his weapon, but before he could draw it, something amazing happened. The massive creature took several steps toward them, then suddenly collapsed onto the ground. Its whole body began shaking and twitching like it was having some kind of seizure. Strange sounds came from its throat that sounded almost like choking or gasping. After about 30 seconds, the creature stopped moving completely and lay still. The human stood frozen for several minutes, waiting to see if the alien would get up again. When it remained motionless, Dr. Walsh suggested they return to the shuttle immediately. None of them understood what had just happened, but they all agreed it was time to leave. Jake's hand was still bleeding as they hurried back across the alien landscape. He could not stop thinking about those yellow eyes and how they had seemed to be looking directly at him before the creature fell down. Back on the Discovery, the crew reported their strange encounter to Captain Rodriguez. She decided they should leave the planet immediately and return to human space to share their findings with the authorities. Jake cleaned and bandaged his cut properly in the medical bay while wondering if they had somehow poisoned the alien creature without meaning to. He had no idea that his small wound would soon change everything for humanity and the entire galaxy. 3 weeks after leaving the planet with the strange ruins, the USS Discovery arrived at Nexus Station. Jake had never seen anything like the massive structure that floated in space ahead of them. The station was 10 times bigger than any human building, with sections that spun slowly to create artificial gravity. Thousands of lights covered its surface, and ships from different worlds docked at ports all around its outer ring. This was humanity's first real meeting place with alien civilizations, and Jake felt nervous about what they might find there. Captain Rodriguez called the senior crew to the briefing room to prepare for their arrival. She explained that Nexus Station housed representatives from over 40 different alien species that made up something called the Galactic Federation. Humans had been invited to join this group only 6 months ago after making first contact with an alien trader ship near Mars. The Federation wanted to learn about Earth's culture and technology, while humans hoped to gain access to advanced science and new worlds to explore. Commander Steve Jackson met their shuttle at the docking bay when they arrived at the station. He was a tall man with gray hair who had been serving as humanity's first ambassador to the alien government. Jake noticed that Commander Jackson looked tired and stressed as he shook hands with Captain Rodriguez. The commander explained that their report about the creature on the planet had created quite a stir among the alien representatives. Several species wanted to meet with the crew immediately to hear their story in person. The inside of Nexus Station amazed Jake even more than the outside. The corridors were wide enough for 10 people to walk side by side, and the ceilings were at least 20 feet high. Aliens of all shapes and sizes moved through the halls going about their business. Some looked almost human except for different colored skin or extra arms. Others were so strange that Jake had trouble figuring out which end was their head. A few aliens stared at the humans as they passed, but most seemed used to seeing new species around the station. Commander Jackson led them to a large meeting room with a curved table that could seat about 30 beings. Representatives from 12 different alien species were already waiting for them. Jake recognized some of the races from the pictures he had studied during the journey, but seeing them in person was completely different. The Altarians looked like tall, thin humans with blue skin and large black eyes. The Centaurians resembled giant insects walking on their back legs. The Draconians were covered in scales and had small horns growing from their foreheads. Ambassador Zethkri of the Altarian Collective spoke first in a voice that sounded like music. She asked Captain Rodriguez to show the recordings they had made on the planet's surface. When the holographic display activated in the center of the table, Jake watched the aliens carefully to see their reactions. Most of them leaned forward with interest when the black ruins appeared on the screen. Several made notes on small devices they carried. Everything changed when the massive creature stepped out from behind the collapsed wall. Ambassador Zethkri made a sound like a scream and fell back in her chair. High Counselor Vexstar of the Draconian Empire stood up so quickly that his chair fell over backward. Other aliens around the table began talking rapidly in their own languages, creating a noise that hurt Jake's ears. Commander Jackson had to call for quiet several times before the room settled down enough to continue. The recording showed the creature taking steps toward the human team before suddenly collapsing on the ground. Jake watched himself standing there with blood dripping from his cut hand while the alien being shook and twitched before going completely still. When the recording ended, the meeting room was silent for almost a full minute. Finally, High Counselor Vexstar spoke in heavily accented English, asking to see the human who had been bleeding during the encounter. Jake felt his face turn red as all the alien eyes focused on him. He stood up slowly and gave a small wave, not knowing what else to do. The Draconian counselor stared at him for a long moment, then asked if he still had the wound from the planet. Jake showed them his bandaged hand, explaining that the cut was almost healed now, but still tender. Several aliens made excited noises and began talking among themselves again. Dr. Emma Walsh presented her analysis of the encounter to the assembled representatives. She explained that their sensors had continued monitoring the creature even after it collapsed. The readings showed that its heart was still beating and its brain was still active throughout the entire episode. The creature had not died or even lost consciousness. It had deliberately pretended to be dead while the humans were present. When Dr. Walsh finished her report, the aliens exchanged worried looks that made Jake uncomfortable. Ambassador Zethkri asked permission to speak privately with her fellow representatives. The humans were asked to wait in another room while the aliens discussed what they had learned. Jake sat in the waiting area, wondering why everyone seemed so frightened by what had happened. The creature had not attacked them or even tried to communicate. It had simply fallen down and pretended to be dead. He could not understand why this was causing such a strong reaction among the alien diplomats. After 2 hours, the humans were called back to the meeting room. High Counselor Vexstar looked directly at Jake as he spoke. He explained that the creature they had encountered was called a Vorthok in the old galactic languages. These beings were known throughout the galaxy as the most dangerous predators anyone had ever discovered. For thousands of years, Vorthok had appeared on worlds across known space, always alone and always deadly. No military force had ever successfully fought one of these creatures and won, the counselor continued, explaining that Vorthok showed no interest in territory or resources or even communication with other species. They simply appeared, hunted, killed, then disappeared again. Entire colonies had been abandoned after just one Vorthok sighting. Whole star systems had been declared off limits because these creatures were known to hunt there. Every species in the Federation had lost people and worlds to Vorthok attacks over the centuries. Jake felt his stomach drop as he realized what this meant. The creature that had collapsed in front of them was apparently one of the most feared beings in the entire galaxy. Yet it had chosen to pretend to be dead rather than attack a small group of humans. Ambassador Zethkri explained that this had never happened before in recorded history. No Vorthok had ever retreated from potential prey or shown any sign of Fear or hesitation, Dr. Walsh asked what made the Vortex so dangerous that entire civilizations feared them. General Kortha of the Centauran Defense Force answered her question. He described creatures that could move faster than the eye could, follow, and had claws that could cut through the strongest armor. Their skin was nearly impossible to penetrate with most weapons, and they seemed to feel no pain even when injured. A single Vorthok could destroy an entire military base and everyone in it before vanishing without a trace, the general told them. About the massacre of Kepler Prime, where one Vorthok had killed 30,000 colonists and a full battalion of soldiers before disappearing. He described the siege of New Altair, where a single creature had terrorized an entire star system for months, keeping supply ships away and forcing millions of people to live in underground shelters. Every species represented at the table had similar stories of death and destruction caused by these apex predators. Commander Jackson asked why the aliens thought this particular Vorthok had behaved so differently around humans. High Counselor Vexstar admitted that none of them had any idea. The behavior was completely unprecedented and went against everything they knew about these creatures. This was why so many representatives had rushed to Nexus Station when they heard about the encounter. They desperately wanted to understand what had made a Vorthok choose flight over fight for the first time in galactic history. Jake looked around the room at all the alien faces staring at him. He was just a 19-year-old cadet from Ohio who had cut his hand on a piece of metal. Now he was apparently connected to something that had terrified advanced civilizations for thousands of years. The small bandage on his palm suddenly felt much more important than a simple first aid measure. Something about his blood or his presence had caused one of the galaxy's most feared predators to fake its own death rather than attack. As the meeting ended, Ambassador Zethkri approached Jake directly. She asked if he would be willing to undergo some medical tests so their scientists could try to understand what had happened on the planet. Jake agreed, knowing that this might be important for all of humanity's future relationships with alien species. He had no idea that his simple cut would soon reveal one of the most shocking discoveries in galactic history. General Kortha of the Centauran Defense Force stood alone in his private quarters aboard Nexus Station, staring out at the stars. The old soldier had seen more death and destruction than any being should have to witness in 10 lifetimes. His forearms bore scars from dozens of battles, and his compound eyes had watched entire worlds burn. But nothing in his long military career had prepared him for what he had just learned about the human encounter with a Vorthok. The general's mind drifted back 40 years to his first meeting with one of the apex predators. He had been a young lieutenant, then serving on a patrol ship near the Outer Rim territories. They had received a distress signal from a mining colony on Zarian 7 and rushed to provide assistance. What they found when they arrived would haunt Kortha for the rest of his life. The colony had been home to 3,000 miners and their families. When the rescue ships landed, they found empty buildings with doors torn off their hinges and walls, covered in claw marks that went deeper than any normal weapon could cut. Bodies were scattered throughout the settlement, but not in the way that suggested a normal attack. The victims had been hunted one by one like animals, with no chance to fight back or even run very far. Kortha had been examining the communications center when he heard his fellow soldiers screaming outside. He rushed to the window and saw something that defied everything he thought he knew about combat. A creature 12 feet tall and covered in black skin was moving through his unit like they were standing still. Its claws cut through their armor like it was made of paper, while its speed made it nearly impossible to target with their weapons. The young lieutenant had emptied his entire weapons power cell at the creature without hitting it even once. The Vorthok moved in ways that seemed to violate the laws of physics, dodging between laser blasts that should have been impossible to avoid. When it finally turned its yellow eyes toward Kortha, he thought his life was over. Instead, the creature simply vanished into the rocky hills around the colony, leaving him as the only survivor of a 20-soldier unit. That encounter had shaped the rest of General Kortha's career. He had dedicated his life to studying the Vorthok and trying to find ways to defend against them. Over the decades, he had responded to 17 different Vorthok attacks across 6 star systems. Each time the story was the same. The creatures appeared without warning, killed everything in their path, then disappeared as mysteriously as they had come. The general walked to his desk and activated a holographic display showing the galactic map. Red markers indicated every known Vorthok sighting over the past 1,000 years. There were hundreds of them scattered across dozens of worlds with no apparent pattern or logic. The creatures seemed to appear randomly, striking at colonies' mining operations and even military installations before vanishing back into unknown space. Scientists had tried for centuries to understand where the Vorthok came from or what motivated their attacks. Some theories suggested they were escaped biological weapons from an ancient war. Others believed they might be the last survivors of a dead civilization seeking revenge against the galaxy. A few researchers thought they could be interdimensional beings that slipped between realities to hunt. None of these ideas had ever been proven because no one had ever captured a living Vorthok or found their homeworld. The closest anyone had come to understanding these creatures was during the siege of New Altair 15 years earlier. General Kortha had been in command of the defense forces when a single Vorthok had appeared in the system and began systematically attacking supply convoys. For 8 months, the creature had prevented any ships from reaching the planet, forcing millions of people to ration food and medical supplies while living in underground bunkers. Every attempt to hunt down the Vorthok had failed completely. The creature would attack a convoy, destroy it entirely, then vanish before military ships could respond. It seemed to know exactly where the defense forces were positioned and how to avoid their patrols. Dozens of the galaxy's best military strategists had tried to predict its movements, but the Vorthok always stayed one step ahead of their plans. The siege had finally ended when the creature simply disappeared one day without explanation. Supply ships were able to reach New Altair again and life slowly returned to normal, but the psychological damage to the population was enormous. Many people refused to leave the underground shelters for months afterward. Some families abandoned the planet, entirely unable to live with the constant fear that the Vorthok might return at any moment. General Kortha remembered walking through the empty streets of New Altair's capital city after the siege ended. Windows were boarded up and businesses remained closed even though the immediate danger had passed. Children who had spent 8 months hiding underground were afraid to play outside in the sunlight. The Vorthok had not needed to kill anyone on the planet to destroy the community. The mere threat of its presence had been enough to terrorize millions of people. This was the true power of the Vorthok and what made them so much more dangerous than any conventional military force. They were living nightmares that represented pure, unstoppable death to every species in the galaxy. Parents told stories about them to frighten misbehaving children. Soldiers used them as examples of ultimate enemies that could not be defeated. Entire star systems had been abandoned simply because someone had reported a possible Vorthok sighting in the area. The general turned his attention back to the present situation and the impossible story he had heard from the human crew. According to their reports, a Vorthok had deliberately chosen to feign death rather than attack a small group of unarmed explorers. This went against everything that was known about these creatures and their behavior patterns over thousands of years of recorded encounters. Kortha activated his personal communication device and began reviewing files from every Vorthok encounter. In military records, he searched for any previous instance where one of these creatures had shown hesitation, fear, or any behavior other than immediate attack. After 3 hours of research, he found exactly what he expected to find: nothing. In every single recorded encounter throughout galactic history, Vorthok had attacked without warning and fought until either all their enemies were dead or they chose to disappear. The implications of the human encounter were staggering to consider. If something about these particular humans had caused a Vorthok to retreat, then humanity might possess the key to defending against the galaxy's most feared predators. But what could a group of primitive explorers from a newly discovered world have that advanced civilizations with thousands of years of technology and military experience lacked? General Kortha thought about the young human cadet who had been bleeding during the encounter. Jake Murphy seemed like an ordinary being with no special training or abilities that would make him threatening to an apex predator. The general had fought alongside warriors from dozens of different species, including some with natural weapons and armor that far exceeded anything humans possessed. Yet none of them had ever caused the Vorthak to show even a moment of hesitation. The old soldier realized that he needed to learn everything possible about human biology and psychology. If there was something unique about their species that affected Vorthak behavior, then the military applications could revolutionize galactic defense strategies. For the first time in his long career, General Kortha allowed himself to hope that there might actually be a way to protect innocent people from these unstoppable killers. Meanwhile, in the medical section of Nexus Station, Jake Murphy was undergoing his 5th round of tests in 2 days. Alien doctors had taken samples of his blood, saliva, and even his breath, trying to identify what might have caused the Vorthak's strange reaction. The young cadets submitted to every procedure they requested, knowing that the information might help save lives across the galaxy. Dr. Emma Walsh worked alongside the alien scientists, comparing human biological data with samples from other species. She found it fascinating to see how different races had evolved unique biochemical signatures over millions of years of development on various worlds. But she could not identify anything about human physiology that would seem threatening to a creature like a VORTHAK. As word of the encounter spread throughout Nexus Station, more alien representatives arrived daily, wanting to hear the story firsthand. Species that had been enemies for centuries set aside their differences to work together on this potentially galaxy-changing discovery. The mere possibility that humanity might hold the key to defending against Vorthak had already begun shifting political alliances and trade agreements across known space. Jake found himself at the center of attention that he never wanted or expected. All he had done was cut his hand on a piece of alien metal while collecting rock samples for his first exploration mission. Now beings from across the galaxy were studying him like he might be the most important discovery in their recorded history. The young cadet from Ohio was beginning to understand that his small accident might have changed everything for humanity and every other species in the Federation. Dr. Carol Price stepped off the transport ship onto Nexus Station, carrying 2 cases of scientific equipment and the hopes of humanity's entire scientific community. She was Earth's leading expert in biochemistry and had spent the 3-week journey to the station reviewing every piece of data about the Vorthak encounter. The 45-year-old scientist from California had studied blood chemistry for over 20 years, but had never imagined her research would become crucial to galactic politics. Behind Dr. Price came a team of 12 other scientists from Earth, representing the best minds in biology, chemistry, and xenological research. They had been selected from universities and research facilities across the planet after humanity's government realized the enormous importance of understanding what had happened on that distant world. Each scientist carried specialized equipment that could analyze human biological samples in ways that alien technology might not be able to duplicate. Commander Steve Jackson met the Earth team at the docking bay and quickly briefed them on the current situation. Over the past 2 weeks, representatives from 60 different alien species had arrived at Nexus Station, all desperate to understand the Vorthak encounter. Several governments had already offered massive trade deals to humanity in exchange for access to whatever defensive capability humans might possess. The political implications were growing larger every day as word spread throughout the galaxy. Dr. Price was immediately taken to the medical research facility where Jake Murphy had been undergoing tests for the past week. The young cadet looked tired but remained cooperative as alien scientists continued their examinations. Dr. Price introduced herself and explained that she was there to work with the alien researchers to solve the mystery of why the Vorthak had retreated. Jake seemed relieved to finally meet another human who might understand what he was going through. The research facility was more advanced than anything Dr. Price had ever seen on Earth. alien technology could analyze biological samples at the molecular level and identify chemical compounds that human instruments could barely detect. She spent her first day learning how to operate the equipment, while reviewing all the data that had been collected from Jake's blood and tissue samples. The results were detailed beyond anything she thought possible, but they revealed no obvious answers. Working alongside Dr. Zethkry of the Altarian Medical Research Institute, Dr. Price began comparing human blood chemistry with samples from dozens of other species. The alien scientist had been studying Vorthak encounters for over 30 years, hoping to find some biological factor that might explain their behavior. Together, the two researchers began building a comprehensive database of chemical signatures from every known intelligent species in the galaxy. The breakthrough came on the fourth day, when Dr. Price was analyzing the iron compounds in human blood. She noticed that humans had an unusual combination of iron-based molecules that created a very specific chemical signature when combined with adrenaline and other stress hormones. This combination was unique among all the species they had tested, and seemed to be connected to humanity's evolutionary development on Earth over millions of years. Dr. Zethkry became excited when she saw the analysis results. She explained that her research had found references in ancient Vorthak encounters to something called the scent of the first hunt. Old records mentioned that Vorthak seemed to be searching for traces of specific chemical signatures that reminded them of their original prey species. Most scientists had dismissed these references as primitive superstition, but Dr. Price's discovery suggested they might actually be based on biological reality. The two scientists worked around the clock for the next 3 days, analyzing every aspect of the chemical signature they had discovered. They found that human blood contained not just iron compounds, but also trace elements that were absorbed from Earth's unique soil composition over evolutionary time. The combination created a biochemical fingerprint that was unlike anything found in other species that had evolved on different worlds with different atmospheric and geological conditions. Dr. Price requested access to the Galactic biological database maintained by the Federation Science Council. This massive collection contained genetic and chemical information from thousands of species, including many that had gone extinct over the millennia. She hoped to find some connection between humanity's unique signature and the species that Vorthak had originally hunted on their unknown homeworld. The search through extinct species data took 2 full days, but finally produced results that shocked everyone involved in the research. Dr. Price found records of a species called the Kethmori that had existed over 100,000 years ago before disappearing from the galactic fossil record. The chemical signature of Kethmori blood was nearly identical to what she had found in human samples, with only minor differences that could be explained by evolutionary adaptation. Dr. Zethkry immediately understood the implications of this discovery. If humans carried the same chemical signature as an ancient prey species, then Vorthak encountering them would experience an instinctive recognition response. But this still did not explain why the Vorthak had chosen to retreat rather than attack. Prey recognition should have triggered hunting behavior, not avoidance. The answer came when Dr. Price dug deeper into the Kethmori records and found additional information about their extinction. The ancient species had not simply died out from natural causes or disease. They had been hunted to extinction by an apex predator that dominated their homeworld for thousands of years. The records described this predator as an unstoppable killing machine that had eventually eliminated not only the Kethmori, but also itself by destroying its own food source. Dr. Price felt her heart racing as she read the description of this ancient apex predator. The creature was described as 12 feet tall with black skin, yellow eyes, and claws that could cut through stone. It matched the physical description of modern Vorthak, perfectly suggesting that these creatures were not just random killers but the descendants of the species that had hunted the Kethmori to extinction over 100,000 years ago. But there was more in the ancient records that made Dr. Price's discovery even more significant. The Kethmori had not been defenseless prey animals. They had been apex predators themselves, ruling their world until an even deadlier species had emerged. to hunt them. The records described the Kethmori as perfect killing machines that had dominated their ecosystem for millions of years before meeting something that was even more deadly than they were. Dr. Zethkri gasped when she realized what this meant. Humans did not just smell like ancient prey to the Vorthek. They smelled like the apex predators that had once dominated the Vorthek's own homeworld. The chemical signature that Dr. Price had discovered was not the scent of victims, but the scent of something that had been able to hunt and kill the ancestors of the most feared creatures in the galaxy. The two scientists rushed to confirm their theory by analyzing the stress hormone patterns in Jake's blood samples. They found that when humans experience danger or excitement, their bodies produced a specific combination of chemicals that matched exactly what the ancient records described for Kethmori combat responses. To a Vorthek, detecting this signature, humans would not smell like prey at all. They would smell like the ancient enemy that their species had learned to fear over 100,000 years of evolutionary history. Dr. Price sat back in her chair, stunned by the magnitude of what they had discovered. Humanity was not just another species that happened to confuse the Vorthek. They were the genetic and chemical inheritors of a bloodline that represented the Vorthek's most ancient and deadly enemy. Every human carried in their blood the signature of creatures that had once been able to hunt and kill the ancestors of the galaxy's most feared predators. The implications went far beyond simple biology. If Vorthek had an instinctive fear response to human chemical signatures, then the presence of humans could potentially end the terror that had plagued the galaxy for thousands of years. The creatures that had destroyed entire civilizations and caused the abandonment of whole star systems might actually be afraid of a species that had only recently learned to leave their home planet. Jake Murphy listened as Dr. Price explained their findings to him. The young cadet struggled to understand how his blood could be connected to ancient alien creatures that had lived and died before Earth's dinosaurs had even evolved. It seemed impossible that something in his genetic makeup could affect beings that had terrorized the galaxy for millennia. Yet the evidence was clear, and the reactions of the alien scientists confirmed that this discovery was real and significant. As word of the breakthrough spread throughout Nexus Station, the political situation began changing rapidly. Species that had been neutral toward humanity suddenly wanted to establish diplomatic relations. Governments that had been reluctant to share their technology now offered generous partnerships. The mere possibility that humans could provide protection against Vorthek attacks had made humanity the most valuable species in the galaxy. Almost overnight, Dr. Price knew that their discovery would change everything for both humanity and the galactic community. 6 months after the discovery that changed galactic history, Jake Murphy stood on the observation deck of humanity's newest space station, watching construction ships work around the clock to complete the orbital facility. The young man who had once been a nervous cadet from Ohio was now Lieutenant Jake Murphy, specialist in Vorthek behavioral analysis and the most requested person in the galaxy. His simple accident with a piece of alien metal had transformed not only his own life but the entire relationship between humanity and every other species in known space. The space station below them was called New Terra Station, and it represented humanity's rapid rise in galactic politics. What had started as a small diplomatic outpost 6 months earlier was now a massive facility that served as headquarters for the newly formed Human Defense Corps. Ships from dozens of different worlds docked at the station daily, bringing representatives who wanted to negotiate protection agreements with Earth's government. Captain Lisa Rodriguez now held the rank of admiral and commanded the Human Defense Corps' fleet of 40 ships. Most of these vessels had been gifts from alien governments desperate to maintain good relations with humanity. The Altarian Collective had provided advanced medical ships. The Draconian Empire had contributed heavy cruisers equipped with their most powerful weapons. Even species that had been enemies for centuries worked together to ensure that humans would be willing to help defend their worlds. Jake's role in this new organization was unlike anything that had ever existed before. His official title was Vorthek Response Specialist, but everyone simply called him the Guardian. Whenever reports came in of Vorthak activity in any star system, Jake was immediately dispatched to the area with a full support team. His mere presence had ended 3 separate Vorthak attacks over the past 4 months, with each incident following the same pattern. The creature would detect his chemical signature and immediately flee rather than continue hunting, the first confirmed. Save had occurred in the Kepler 186 system, where a Vorthak had been stalking a mining colony for several days. Local security forces were helpless to stop the creature, and evacuation ships were preparing to remove the entire population when Jake arrived aboard a Human Defense Corps vessel. Within hours of his landing on the planet, the Vorthak had disappeared completely, allowing normal operations to resume and saving the lives of 8,000 colonists. Word of Jake's success spread quickly through the galactic communication networks. Species that had lived in fear of Vorthak attacks for thousands of years suddenly had hope that these unstoppable predators could actually be deterred. Requests for human protection began flooding into Earth's government from every corner of the galaxy. Star systems that had been abandoned due to Vorthak activity started making plans to reestablish colonies under human protection. Dr. Carol Price continued her research into the biological mechanisms behind humanity's effect on Vorthak behavior. Working with scientists from across the galaxy, she had identified the specific chemical compounds that triggered the creature's fear response. Her team was developing synthetic versions of these compounds that could potentially be used to create Vorthak deterrent systems for worlds that did not have human populations. The research was progressing slowly but showed promising results in laboratory tests. On Earth, President Nathan Cole addressed the United Nations about humanity's new role in galactic affairs. The planet that had been isolated and unknown just 1 year earlier was now receiving trade offers worth trillions of credits from alien governments. Advanced technologies were being shared freely in exchange for human protection services. Earth's economy was transforming as alien science helped solve problems ranging from clean energy to space travel that would have taken centuries to develop independently. The political changes were just as dramatic as the economic ones. Humanity had gone from being newcomers seeking acceptance in the galactic community to being the most important species in the Federation. Every major decision now involved consultation with human representatives. Trade routes were planned to ensure human ships could respond quickly to Vorthak threats. Even territorial disputes between other species were being mediated by human diplomats who were seen as neutral parties with the power to protect both sides. Jake found the attention overwhelming at times but understood the importance of his role. He had seen the fear in alien eyes when they spoke about Vorthak attacks. These creatures had terrorized the galaxy for so long that entire civilizations had shaped their development around avoiding them. Parents told children stories about Vorthak to teach them about ultimate danger. Military academies used them as examples of unbeatable enemies. The psychological impact of their reign of terror went far beyond the actual lives they had taken. Lieutenant Ben Cooper now served as Jake's security chief and commanded a team of elite soldiers from multiple species. The human officer had been promoted to colonel and given resources that most generals could only dream of possessing. His job was to ensure Jake's safety during missions and to study Vorthak behavior patterns that might help predict future attacks. Cooper had become an expert on these creatures despite never wanting to encounter one. Again, after that first terrifying meeting, Dr. Emma Walsh led the Xenobiology Research Division that was working to understand more about Vorthak origins and motivations. Her team had discovered evidence suggesting that these creatures were not randomly distributed across the galaxy but were following ancient migration patterns established over thousands of generations. This information was helping predict where future encounters might occur, allowing defense forces to position human protection teams in advance. The space station where Jake now lived housed over 10,000 beings from 60 different species, all working together on various aspects of Vorthak research and galactic defense. The facility had become a symbol of interspecies cooperation that had emerged from humanity's unique biological advantage. Scientists who had been rivals for centuries now shared their research freely when it related to understanding or deterring Vorthic attacks. Jake often thought about the irony of his situation as he walked through the diverse corridors of New Terra Station. A small cut on his hand had revealed that humanity carried the chemical signature of ancient apex predators that had once hunted the ancestors of the galaxy's most feared creatures. This accident had given his species more political power and influence than they could have gained through centuries of normal diplomatic development. The transformation had not been without challenges. Some human groups questioned whether Earth should be taking on the responsibility of protecting the entire galaxy from an unknown number of Vorthic scattered across hundreds of star systems. Others worried that humanity was becoming too dependent on their unique biological advantage and needed to continue developing conventional military and technological capabilities. These concerns were addressed when Admiral Rodriguez announced the expansion of the Human Defense Corps to include volunteers from other species. While only humans could actually deter Vorthic attacks, the support infrastructure required beings with different skills and abilities. Altarian doctors provided medical support. Centauran engineers maintained the ships and equipment. Draconian tacticians helped plan response strategies. The organization had become a true galactic force representing the best of all member species. Jake received word that another Vorthag had been detected in the Tau Ceti system, threatening a research station with 300 scientists aboard. He gathered his gear and headed to the docking bay where his ship waited with engines already warming for immediate departure. The crew consisted of beings from 6 different worlds, all working together to protect innocent lives from an ancient terror. As their ship left New Terra Station and jumped to faster-than-light travel, Jake reflected on how much had changed since that day on the planet with the Blackstone ruins. He was no longer a nervous cadet worried about making mistakes on his first mission. He had become something that had never existed before in galactic history, a human being whose very presence could send the galaxy's apex predators fleeing in terror. The young man from Ohio who had accidentally cut his hand while collecting rock samples had inadvertently discovered humanity's most unexpected superpower. Every human carried in their blood the chemical memory of creatures that had once been deadly enough to hunt the hunters that terrorized the galaxy. That ancient legacy had given humanity a responsibility and an opportunity that would shape the future of every species in known space. The ship carrying Jake toward his next mission represented more than just a rescue operation. It symbolized the new reality where humanity served as protectors for civilizations that had advanced far beyond Earth's technology but lacked the one thing that could stop their greatest fear. A single drop of human blood had rewritten the balance of power across the entire galaxy and established humanity as the guardians of galactic peace in ways they never could have imagined. When they first reached for the stars,